Hello and welcome to the Game Lore Archives. It's been a while since we've done a Elder Scrolls lore, so I think it is time to discuss the Aldmer or the Altmer. We will cover both in these as they're as close as two could be, really.
Once Mundus was created, many of the Alephani fell to Nirn. Many fell into one group who became known as the Old Alephani, and some were scattered. These were then become the Wandering Alephani. When Wandering Alephani eventually found the Old Alephani, they believed that they would be welcomed with open arms. They weren't. The Old Alephani didn't want to help. This then in turn started a huge war, which eventually split the continent apart, separating the warring factions and ending the war. Most of the Wandering Alephani were left stranded on different continents, and soon evolved into the differing races of men depending on their surroundings. One faction of the Wandering Alephani was left behind on Tamriel, near Morrowind, and became the Dwemer. The Old Alephani, who were left on the island of Almeris, and would eventually evolve into the Aldmer, progenitor to all but one of the elven races that we know today. Very little is known about Almeris, apart from a few ancient tapestries and texts which can be found on Somerset Isle's Crystal Tower.
So, according to these records that are found, the island of Almeris was an island constructed as an endless city. It was so built up that no nature remained, and houses were built skywards to fit the population among many high towers. However, we may never know if this is true. The lost city of Aldmer has long vanished, and its location remains the oldest mystery in Tamriel. Many adventurers have tried to locate it, but much like our own world's lost city of Atlantis, it's never been found. Maybe the mystery might never be solved, but once it was gone, the Aldmer sailed until they found southern Tamriel. Some elves went to Valenwood as a connection to the mainland if they ever needed it. However, the majority settled in Somerset Isles. Once they arrived, the tapestries found in the Crystal Tower say they fought their land from the Slode, which we know to be true, and many other strange, terrifying, and hopefully now extinct creatures. Some of these creatures are so terrifying and bizarre that people think they might be faking a little bit of claim to fame. So hopefully extinct.
An embellishment of the truth.
Maybe, yeah. Eventually, they established the Somerset Isles as their home, and they started to explore the rest of the continent. They sent out quite a few explorers, but none returned other than the famous Topal the pilot. When Topal returned, he regaled the Aldmer of tales of beast tribes that could be found throughout the land, and the wondrous sights and sounds that were waiting for them if they left. It's also said that Topal taught the Khajiit to read during his travels, as they didn't know how to read or write or were illiterate. After a few years, that's your line.
Yeah. After a few years, a hierarchy began to form within the culture, which still exists to this day. At the top of the hierarchy is the wise, which includes the teachers and the priests. Next are the artists, then princes, then warriors, landowners, merchants, and then the workers. Below workers are beasts, such as enslaved goblins, who do the work of the Altmer which they believe to be below themselves. With this change of class, the Mer's very religion changed as well. Where they used to worship their ancestors, they started to worship the race's better ancestors.
It was at this time that the Aldmer race ended. Now, whether it was that they disagreed about the new class system, or their change in religion, or they just wanted to see the sights Topal had told them about, huge groups of Aldmer started leaving the Somerset Isles. So some travelled to Skyrim, and they eventually became the Snow Elves. Some went to Cyrodiil and became the Aelids. Some followed the prophet Veloth to Morrowind and became the Chimna, who eventually became the Dunmer. The ones who tried to stop this movement then became the Orcs, as Orcs are a kind of elf. The Aldmer that lived in Valenwood before even going to the Somerset Isle became the Bosmer, and finally the ones who stayed in Somerset Isles became the Altmer. By the time the first recorded history of man began, in the First Era, there was no longer any Aldmer left.
The Altmer, or High Elves of Somerset, are the closest elven race to the Aldmer, and are considered their closest descendants. They strive to maintain the Aldmeri appearance by strict marriage and reproduction policies. Deviating from these traditions is a crime punishable by exile, which some High Elves consider worse than death, because what's the point of living outside of their pretty perfect society? High Elves usually live for about 200 years, although the oldest elves live up to about 300.
That's really, really old for an elf.
Super old. They usually spend their elongated lives perfecting their hobbies and passions, which often leaves them surrounded with the finest artworks and clothings of all the races.
Altmer also consider themselves one of the most civilised, intelligent and magically adept race of Tamriel, and argue that theirs is the first true culture, which is hard for scholars to disagree with. High Elf civilization is hard for outsiders to learn, as it comes with so many different customs and rules that must be abided at all times, otherwise you're being really offensive, basically. So for example, just usual dining table, which shouldn't be that hard to just eat, but you never refill your own glass, but the person's on your left when it gets low. It's rude to let it get empty, so you've constantly got to be on the lookout. You can never rest utensils on the edge of any plate. You cannot eat more than the most prestigious member of the function. The head of the table must always lead the discussion. You must never, ever watch anyone as they chew. You must use the correct utensil. If you don't, you are basically a barbarian. And I think that we can conclude that elves would really fucking hate me to eat at their table. As if he barely ate anything, I am eating more than him.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
so
and I would probably use the wrong.
Weekly Dominoes is not good then.
Yeah, no.
The Altmer religion is similar to that of man theology, and particularly outside the Somerset Isles are likely to worship the 8 divines. Their beliefs differ in 2 main factors. The men of Nirn generally believe that they are created by the gods, whereas the High Elves believe that they are direct descendants of the gods. The Altmer also do not view Talos as a god, as he was originally a Nord human.
Which explains a hell of a lot of their pompousness.
Yeah.
It explains a lot. Well, I'm descended from a god and you're not.
And you're not. Yeah, it doesn't. It's it definitely demonstrates how up themselves they are.
Yeah, and because of this, the High Elves try and separate themselves from other races of Tamriel and are quite secretive of their racial secrets and their culture. So to this day, outsiders are forbidden to enter the capital city of Alinor. Traders are only allowed access to the port, and what they've seen, they describe the city as a hypnotic swirl of ramparts and impossibly high towers, designed to catch the light of the sun and break into its component colours, which lies draped across its stones until you are thankful for night's fall. And it's also been described as a city made from glass or insect wings, which I'm sure would be very beautiful, but no one's allowed in it to see it closer.
Yeah, it seems like a wasted effort, doesn't it?
Yeah.
This secrecy and separation comes from the race's belief that they are superior to the other races of Tamriel. In recent years, however, this belief has been shaken, starting with the cultural war between various factions of the Altmer. In year 110, in the Third Era, the Maormer, also known as the Sea Elves of Piondir, nearly conquered the Somerset Isles. The Altmer have no way of winning, so had to ask help from the Sigic Order, an order of elves looking to preserve the old ways of the Altmer religion with the help of the Empire. Without asking the Empire's help, they would lose their home, but the price of the help was for their province to be assimilated into the Empire. So this merging shook High Elven society's confidence to its core. This has led to a younger generation of High Elves believing that the strict culture is wrong and needs to change. And for better or for worse, this change seems to be slowly happening. Recently, different races have been allowed positions of power that would have otherwise been forbidden a century ago. Unfortunately, not all of the younger Altmer want this to be a peaceful change. A shadowy group has emerged calling themselves The Beautiful, who target Altmer nobility and their most important and precious monuments, including multiple attempts on the Crystal Tower itself. And while the tower has so far been defended, some members of nobility have not been so lucky. Some of the High Elves are rebelling against their way of life by embracing the past, and lately the Sigic Order have been taking more members yearly than they have for a very long time.
At the end of the Third Era, huge Oblivion gates opened throughout the Empire, which we saw in the game Oblivion. While everyone was affected by this, the empire was left weaker than it has been for a long, long time. Due to this culture civil unrest, the Thalmor saw an opportunity to leave the empire that has caused so much resentment. The Thalmor resurrected the Aldmer dominion for the third time.
So the idea of the first Altmer dominion was formed by Queen Irene of the Altmer, with the belief that none could not belong to the races of man, and the pact was formed between the Wood Elves, the Khajiit, and the High Elves to combat Malak Bal's invasion of the imperial city. So once the invasion was stopped and the pact's goal of supremacy across Tamriel wasn't fulfilled, the dominion eventually disbanded. It was later reformed about 300 years later to prevent a war between the Bosmer and the Altmer, but dissolved soon after once they were incorporated into the empire.
So, during the Oblivion Crisis, a group called the Thalmor acted like they saved Somerset Isle from disaster, and the public ate it up. We may never know if they actually did save the race, or they just said they did. As their popularity swelled, and the Empire was too weak to dispute their claims, the Thalmor took complete control of Somerset Isle. They then completely shut the borders, and they isolated themselves for 70 years, with no contact with the Empire. Behind the scenes, they took charge of Valenwood by force, and the Third Dominion was born. At this time, the two moons that the Khajiit worship vanished from the sky. When they returned, the Thalmor again took credit for its return, and again, no one can prove if they actually did bring it back or they didn't. But because they essentially, in the Khajiit's eyes, brought back their gods, the Khajiit joined again to make a new pact. The new Aldmer Dominion started a war on the Empire, who were still recovering from the Daedric invasion and were not expecting or prepared for war. The Empire tried to fight the Thalmor off, but after multiple losses, had to sign the White Gold Concordat. This stopped the war and saved many lives. However, the Empire was forced to give up large portions of Southern Hammerfell to the Thalmor, give large portions of gold to them, and were banned from worshipping Talos, the man who became a god. This banning outraged particularly Skyrim, but other provinces. Hammerfell obviously wasn't happy in losing borders, and so various provinces have started breaking off from the Empire or rebelling, weakening the Empire further and making the Thalmor that much more deadly. And that's where we come to in Skyrim the effects of this war.
Alright, well thank you very much for listening to us, delving into the game lore archives and bringing some high quality Aldmer lore. Check back next week and I'm sure we'll have some more videos for you to enjoy, and don't forget to subscribe.